There's a silence more powerful than any speech. A silence that doesn't come from fear, but from a decision, a deliberate refusal to let the world dictate your response. Imagine this. It's 8:59 a.m. in the steel and glass skyscraper overlooking downtown San Jose. Maya stands alone in the elevator, her breath barely audible over the hum of the rising car. She's about to walk into a pitch meeting that could change everything, or nothing. Her ideas had been overlooked for months. Her hours tripled. Credit, always given to someone else. But she doesn't flinch. She doesn't tweet. She doesn't rant to a friend. She just exhales slowly, silently, and walks out of the elevator like she owns every floor in the building. Why? Because Maya knows a truth that few dare to believe. Silence, in a world addicted to attention, is power. Welcome to the Silent Edge, the first key in our Stoic journey to outsmarting everyone around you. Not through louder voices or stronger fists, but through deeper roots. This isn't just about keeping quiet when things get hard. It's about stepping into your strengths in a way that shocks people, that confuses them, that makes them underestimate you until it's too late, until you've already won. You see, we live in an era where complaining is not only common, it's rewarded. The louder the pain, the more the attention. People have turned venting into a performance, as if suffering is more real the more people hear it. But Stoics knew better. They knew that when you choose to stop speaking about your struggle, you start mastering it. You stop feeding it. And in that stillness, a deeper strength is born. Maya could have played the victim. It would have been easy. Just one post, one rant over coffee, one tear-filled call. But she understood what Epictetus taught centuries ago. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And she chose not to react, at least, not out loud. Her reactions were internal, calculated, directed like arrows, at the root of the problem. Instead of talking about her exhaustion, she tracked it. Instead of whining about being overlooked, she made a list of what she could control. She turned her journal into a training ground, a place not for pity, but for strategy. Maya's silence wasn't weakness, it was discipline. The kind of discipline that terrifies those who rely on attention to survive. Here's the truth. No. One talks about complaining is cheap. It buys you nothing lasting, but restraint. Restraint buys you clarity. It earns you respect, even if no one says it out loud. Because when you walk into a room and people know you've suffered, but never heard you say it, you command a kind of quiet reverence. That's the Stoic way. Over time, Maya rose. Not through office politics, not through charisma, but through unshakable consistency. She built her reputation like a sculptor builds marble slowly, patiently, piece by piece. And when leadership needed someone who could stay steady in chaos, they didn't pick the loudest. They picked the one who had already proven her strength in silence. This is your challenge now. The next time you face something unfair, frustrating, or overwhelming, pause. Don't tweet. Don't post. Don't run to the nearest listening ear. Instead, write it down. Ask yourself, what's in my control? What's the smallest step I can take forward right now? Then take it quietly. The world wants you to explode, to melt down, to cry out. But there's a reason the strongest structures are the ones that don't make a sound when they hold weight. Be like them. Become immovable. Become silent steel. And if this message hits home, if you feel that surge in your chest, that spark of clarity, then support this channel. Hit the subscribe button and give us the fuel we need to keep building powerful content that helps you rise above the noise. Now, before we move on, I've got a quick challenge for you, a question to make you think. Which mindset reflects a true Stoic approach? A. Expressing your struggles as soon as they happen to get support. B. Observing your emotions, taking action, and processing internally. Type your answer in the comments. A or B? Let's see how many of you are already walking the silent path. James had always been known as someone who could light up a room. He had a natural presence, steady, warm, magnetic. On the field, he was a force. Off the field, he was every coach's favorite. Respectful, humble, the kind of leader you'd follow into anything. But what no one saw, at least not at first, was that James carried too much inside. And one night, that weight tipped just enough for him to let it slip. It wasn't dramatic. There was no breakdown, no emotional outburst. It was just a quiet conversation on a bench outside the practice facility. A teammate sat beside him, tossing a football between his hands, casually asking, "Man, how do you keep your head straight with all the pressure?" It sounded sincere. It felt safe. So James answered. He spoke about his parents, about the expectations back home, about the mental fatigue that sometimes followed him like a shadow after every game. And in that moment, it felt like a relief. But that same week, he heard his own words echoed back to him in the locker room, not with compassion, but with mockery. Slight jabs, subtle mimicry, a tone that told him something sacred had been passed into careless hands. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a quiet shattering of trust. And it made him realize something he hadn't been taught in the weight room or the classroom. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. The second Stoic key, keep it sacred, is not a warning against vulnerability, but a defense of dignity. Stoicism doesn't ask you to become a cold shell, unreachable, or stoic in the misinterpreted modern sense of the word. It asks you to become intentional, to understand that your soul is a private estate, not a public park. And James, with his heart still bruised, began to rebuild his walls, not to shut the world out, but to restore the value of what was within. He started small. Every time he felt the urge to explain himself, he paused. Every time he wanted to tell someone what he was dealing with, he asked himself if that person had earned the right to know. It wasn't about mistrust, it was about discernment. There's a difference between being open and being exposed. One is strength. The other is surrendering too much too soon. James found power in silence. He began journaling again, not for therapy, but for clarity. When something upset him, he wrote it out. When something inspired him, he wrote it down. The page became his confidant, and through those words, he discovered something even deeper. He was more centered when his truth wasn't bouncing off other people's opinions. He didn't need approval. He needed space to think, to feel, to be. In time, James developed what he called his inner filter. Before speaking, he ran his thoughts through 3 questions. Is this true? Is this necessary? Is this mine to share? It changed how he showed up in conversations. He still listened with empathy, still laughed easily, and encouraged others. But there was a new gravity to his presence. People leaned in more when he did speak because his words had weight. He learned that sharing too soon, especially with the wrong people, is like planting a seed in poisoned soil. It doesn't matter how strong the seed is, nothing good grows there. But when you guard your dreams, your doubts, your story, and water them in silence, they grow strong enough to bloom on their own. People began to notice the shift. Teammates who once joked about his stress now came to him for advice. Not because he overshared, but because he radiated something they didn't quite understand: composure. He had become the calm in the storm, and it all started the moment he chose not to bleed in front of those who couldn't heal him. This isn't just a lesson for athletes. It's a lesson for anyone living in a world that rewards oversharing, that equates transparency with value. Your value doesn't come from how many people know your story. It comes from how deeply you know it yourself. You don't owe the world an explanation for every bruise. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is hold something sacred and let it grow quietly in the dark. So ask yourself, who do you share your heart with? Who knows your battles? And more importantly, have they earned that trust? Or did you give it away, hoping they'd prove worthy? James didn't stop being open, but he did start being wise. And in that wisdom, he found something far more powerful than validation. He found peace. In a quiet office on the 23rd floor of a Manhattan high-rise, Lena read the email 3 times just to be sure it was real. She had just been named Senior Creative Director, something she had worked toward for nearly a decade. But there was no shout, no call to her friends, no social media post proclaiming the news. She sat in silence, staring at the screen, her fingers lightly resting on the keyboard. And then, without fanfare, she minimized the window and got back to work. It wasn't that Lena wasn't proud. She was. It had taken everything she had to get there, late nights with her son, asleep on the couch beside her. Rejections that nearly broke her confidence, ideas stolen in meetings and credited to louder voices. But through it all, she had remained steadfast, patient, focused. Lena had learned that true power doesn't always come wrapped in celebration. Sometimes it's quiet, still, even unseen. And that kind of power is often the most unshakable. The third Stoic key is humility, not the performative kind, not false modesty, but real, fire-forged humility, the kind born from doing the work without needing the applause. In a world obsessed with personal branding, where every win is packaged and posted, Stoicism offers something radical. Let your success speak for itself. Lena had embraced that principle not as a strategy, but as a way of life. Her grandfather used to tell her, the loudest drum is often the emptiest. As a child, she didn't understand it. But now, sitting in that office with years of struggle behind her and the promotion finally in hand, she felt the truth of it. She didn't need to prove anything anymore, to anyone. She had already proven it to herself. Humility doesn't mean hiding your light. It means refusing to let your worth be defined by other people's recognition of it. Lena could have shouted her win from the rooftops, but she knew that sharing it too early, too widely, would invite questions, comparisons, and maybe even envy. More than that, it would shift the focus away from the real victory, not the title, but the transformation it represented. She had kept a small notebook throughout her career, hidden in the back drawer of her desk. Not a diary, not even a planner, just a logger, quiet record of ideas pitched, projects completed, lessons learned. She called it her impact book. It wasn't meant for anyone else's eyes. It was her mirror, her measure, her reminder that progress is built in silence long before it's seen. As her responsibilities increased, Lena continued her practice. Not because she needed to track wins, but because it grounded her. It reminded her that the work was the reward, not the recognition. That lesson had kept her steady through the storms. Through the years when no one saw her staying late or catching typos that saved campaigns. And now, even with the corner office and the title on the door, she wasn't tempted to change. In fact, she found that the less she spoke of her success, the more people trusted her. Because she didn't brag, they felt safe around her. Because she didn't compete, they leaned on her. Lena had become the kind of leader who didn't need to say she had power. She simply embodied it. And that presence, that calm certainty, created more impact than any announcement ever could. There's a trap in today's world, the trap of performance. We're taught to turn every moment into content, every success into a signal. But the Stoics knew better. They knew that when you stop chasing the spotlight, you start stepping into real authority. The kind that doesn't fade when the applause ends. Lena had seen others climb fast and fall harder. She had watched coworkers ride waves of hype, only to burn out from the pressure of maintaining the image. She had no interest in that path. Hers was longer, slower, harder, but also deeper, rooted, real. And now, standing where she once dreamed of standing, she felt no need to broadcast it. The win was already hers. So the next time you achieve something big, take a moment, breathe, sit with it in silence. Let the weight of what you've accomplished settle into your bones. Ask yourself, do I need to tell the world? Or is the knowing enough? Because when you can hold success in your hands without needing to lift it above your head, you've already mastered it. You've become humble by fire, and no one can take that from you. Theo's apartment in West Chicago wasn't much. 2 rooms, a hand-me-down couch, walls bare except for a corkboard littered with notes, sketches, and half-formed ideas. But inside those walls, something powerful was growing. By day, he worked at a local cafe, pouring espresso shots and wiping counters with a quiet rhythm. By night, he transformed. He became a filmmaker, not in public, not for clout, but in solitude, frame by frame, story by story. For nearly 2 years, Theo didn't post a single update about his film project. No teasers, no vague tweets, no coming soon graphics with trendy fonts. While the rest of his creative circle documented every coffee-fueled writing session and behind-the-scenes moment, Theo stayed silent. And in that silence, he was building something nobody could see until it was too big to ignore. The 4th Stoic key is mystery. Real power moves in silence. Because silence doesn't mean absence, it means protection. When you keep your vision close, you don't dilute it with the world's noise. You don't trade momentum for approval. Theo learned this early on. He used to share everything. Every script idea, every short film concept, every moment of inspiration. And every time he did, he noticed something subtle. The fire dimmed. The more people knew, the less alive the idea felt in his hands. He realized what the Stoics knew centuries ago. Talking about a thing often replaces the need to do it. The satisfaction of attention tricks the brain into believing you've already accomplished something. But you haven't. You've only surrendered your edge. So this time, he chose secrecy. He created what he called a momentum vault, an encrypted folder and a handwritten journal where he tracked his progress. Not just the wins, but the doubts, the rewrites, the frustrations. Every silent step was recorded not for show, but for self. And slowly, a pattern emerged. When he worked in silence, he worked with clarity. When he shared too soon, he lost that clarity. The film grew from concept to script, from script to storyboard, from storyboard to long, lonely weekends of shooting in borrowed warehouses and abandoned train stations. No one knew, not even his closest friends. And yet, Theo had never felt more connected to a project in his life. He wasn't chasing visibility, he was chasing vision. Then, one day, he dropped the trailer. No warning, just a simple post. "This is what I've been building." Within hours, the views started climbing. People were shocked not just by the quality of the work, but by the fact that it had come from someone they hadn't even realized was creating anything at all. That shock was part of the power. The silence had made the arrival louder. Theo didn't bask in the attention. He didn't rush to explain the process or analyze the symbolism. He let the work speak, and it did, clearly, forcefully. Because real power doesn't need a microphone. It just needs momentum. Stoicism teaches that our actions should whisper before they roar. That the future, by nature, is fragile. It needs shelter. It needs time to mature in darkness before it's strong enough to face the light. By holding his dream close, Theo had given it space to grow, unshaken by opinions, untouched by pressure. This kind of silence isn't passive. It's not fear of being seen. It's the boldness to resist the demand to be visible before you're ready. It's choosing the long road over the loud one. And it's one of the most misunderstood strengths in today's culture. We live in a world that constantly screams, "Show them what you're working on." But Stoicism asks, why? What do you gain by opening the door too soon? And what do you lose? Theo's journey is proof that what you protect grows stronger. Not because it's hidden, but because it's honored. So, here's your challenge. Whatever you're working on, whether it's a business, a piece of art, a dream no one knows about, don't rush to reveal it. Hold it in your hands like a fragile ember. Let it burn quietly, until the day it doesn't need your words anymore. Until it walks into the world on its own legs and makes its presence undeniable. Real power doesn't need an audience to start. It just needs you. Present, focused, unshaken, silent but never still. Zoe never thought the quietest decision she'd make would change her entire inner world. For years, the teacher's lounge had been her escape, a place where laughter flowed, frustrations were aired, and stories filled the space between bell rings. But one afternoon, something shifted. She was sitting at the end of the table, sipping coffee, when a conversation turned sour. A colleague, with a half smile, began dissecting another teacher's mistake. The group followed, piling on, comments like bricks, and soon, the laughter didn't feel light anymore. It felt sharp, like a knife being passed around. Zoe left early that day, her chest tight, not from anger, but from recognition. Somewhere along the line, she'd confused camaraderie with corrosion. Gossip wasn't just background noise, it was slowly drowning out her own clarity. That's when she made the choice, a personal detox, a deliberate cleanse from all conversations that turned people into subjects. The fifth Stoic Ketha, gossip cleanse isn't just about ethics, it's about energy. It's about guarding the space within you that should be focused on growth, purpose, and presence. Because every moment spent critiquing someone else is a moment stolen from becoming who you're meant to be. Zoe began small. She started by observing, not judging, not correcting, just noticing. The way certain conversations drained her, how some voices grew louder only when someone else's voice was being torn down. She realized how easily gossip disguised itself as concern, how criticism wore the mask of casual chatter, and beneath it all was a hunger one she recognized in herself to feel bigger by shrinking. Someone else. That realization hit deep, so she stepped away, not with announcements, not with judgment, but with quiet resolve. She began taking lunch in her classroom, not in isolation, but in sanctuary. She filled that hour with jazz music, poetry, journaling. At first, it felt strange, like absence, like missing out, but over time, it began to feel like arrival. She wasn't escaping the noise. She was coming home to stillness. The Stoics believed that what you feed your mind becomes your spirit. If you nourish yourself on resentment, you grow bitter. If you feast on drama, your peace dissolves. Zoe saw that every word she allowed into her world was a seed, and gossip planted weeds. And then something unexpected happened. Students noticed. She was calmer, more grounded, more present. Parents mentioned the shift. Even colleagues, the same ones who used to pull her into side conversations, began knocking on her door, not to gossip, but to ask for advice. To sit in the quiet they now saw as strength. She hadn't just removed gossip. She had replaced it with intention, with peace, with purpose. Her energy stopped scattering in a dozen directions and began to gather, like a river finding its current. But the real transformation was internal. Zoe no longer needed to compare. She no longer measured her value by others' flaws. Her confidence wasn't built on being better, was built on being centered. That shift gave her a kind of immunity, not from hardship, but from pettiness, from noise, from the subtle, soul-eroding hum of constant judgment. The world thrives on distraction. Social media thrives on outrage. Office culture often thrives on whispers. And yet, within that chaos, you still have a choice. You can participate in it, or you can rise above it, not with arrogance, but with stillness. That's what Zoe chose. And in that choice, she became untouchable, not because no one tried to bring her down, but because she stopped giving them a place to land. So here's your invitation. Try it. For one day, then a week. Remove yourself from gossip, from criticism, from stories that don't belong to you. Watch what happens, not just in your relationships, but in your mind. Feel the weight lift. Feel your focus return. And when you do, you'll realize that silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the presence of power. Zoe never looked back. The lounge still buzzed with stories, still carried the old rhythms, but she walked past it now, smiling, untouched. Not because she had become better than anyone, but because she had chosen to be better for herself. Zoe never thought the quietest decision she'd make would change her entire inner world. For years, the teacher's lounge had been her escape, a place where laughter flowed, frustrations were aired, and stories filled the space between bell rings. But one afternoon, something shifted. She was sitting at the end of the table, sipping coffee, when a conversation turned sour. A colleague, with a half smile, began dissecting another teacher's mistake. The group followed, piling on, comments like bricks, and soon, the laughter didn't feel light anymore. It felt sharp, like a knife being passed around. Zoe left early that day, her chest tight, not from anger, but from recognition. Somewhere along the line, she'd confused camaraderie with corrosion. Gossip wasn't just background noise, it was slowly drowning out her own clarity. That's when she made the choice, a personal detox, a deliberate cleanse from all conversations that turned people into subjects. The fifth Stoic Ketha. Gossip cleanse isn't just about ethics, it's about energy. It's about guarding the space within you that should be focused on growth, purpose, and presence. Because every moment spent critiquing someone else is a moment stolen from becoming who you're meant to be. Zoe began small. She started by observing, not judging, not correcting, just noticing. The way certain conversations drained her, how some voices grew louder only when someone else's voice was being torn down. She realized how easily gossip disguised itself as concern, how criticism wore the mask of casual chatter, and beneath it all was a hunger one she recognized in herself to feel bigger by shrinking someone else. That realization hit deep, so she stepped away, not with announcements, not with judgment, but with quiet resolve. She began taking lunch in her classroom, not in isolation, but in sanctuary. She filled that hour with jazz music, poetry, journaling. At first, it felt strange, like absence, like missing out, but over time, it began to feel like arrival. She wasn't escaping the noise. She was coming home to stillness. The Stoics believed that what you feed your mind becomes your spirit. If you nourish yourself on resentment, you grow bitter. If you feast on drama, your peace dissolves. Zoe saw that every word she allowed into her world was a seed, and gossip planted weeds, and then something unexpected happened. Students noticed. She was calmer, more grounded, more present. Parents mentioned the shift. Even colleagues, the same ones who used to pull her into side conversations, began knocking on her door, not to gossip, but to ask for advice. To sit in the quiet they now saw as strength. She hadn't just removed gossip, she had replaced it with intention, with peace, with purpose. Her energy stopped scattering in a dozen directions and began to gather. Like a river finding its current, but the real transformation was internal. Zoe no longer needed to compare. She no longer measured her value by others' flaws. Her confidence wasn't built on being better, was built on being centered. That shift gave her a kind of immunity. Not from hardship, but from pettiness, from noise, from the subtle, soul-eroding hum of constant judgment. The world thrives on distraction. Social media thrives on outrage. Office culture often thrives on whispers. And yet, within that chaos, you still have a choice. You can participate in it, or you can rise above it, not with arrogance, but with stillness. That's what Zoe chose. And in that choice, she became untouchable, not because no one tried to bring her down, but because she stopped giving them a place to land. So here's your invitation. Try it. For one day, then a week. Remove yourself from gossip, from criticism, from stories that don't belong to you. Watch what happens not just in your relationships, but in your mind. Feel the weight lift. Feel your focus return. And when you do, you'll realize that silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's the presence of power. Zoe never looked back. The lounge still buzzed with stories, still carried the old rhythms. But she walked past it now, smiling, untouched. Not because she had become better than anyone, but because she had chosen to be better for herself. From the chaos of Silicon Valley boardrooms to the quiet shores of Lake Tahoe, the story of Maya, James, Lena, Theo, Zoe, and Eli is not just a collection of modern moments, it's a living embodiment of ancient Stoic wisdom in motion. Each of them came face to face with a version of the world that demanded noise, performance, and attention. And each, in their own way, chose silence, depth, and presence. Instead, Maya learned that strength isn't about being loud when life tests you, it's about being steady. When others crumbled under the weight of pressure, she rose by refusing to let complaint define her. She transformed private struggle into quiet resilience, turning challenge into action rather than spectacle. James discovered that vulnerability without discernment leads to exposure, not connection. After trusting too easily and being betrayed, he chose a different kind of courage, the kind that knows when to speak and when to protect what's sacred. He found that withholding isn't weakness, it's wisdom wrapped in strength. Lena walked through the fire of ambition without ever needing to shout about it. Her victory didn't come from recognition, but from the humility to let her work speak louder than any announcement could. Her promotion was earned in silence and made powerful because of it. Theo's creativity bloomed behind closed doors, away from the noise of validation. While others craved visibility, he nurtured momentum, trusting that the most powerful work doesn't need to declare itself, it reveals itself in time. His silence wasn't secrecy, it was sacred strategy. Zoe, tired of the emotional erosion that comes with gossip, made the radical decision to reclaim her peace. By stepping out of toxic cycles, she stepped into her own authority. Her clarity and emotional strength came not from withdrawal, but from intentional stillness. And Eli, the veteran who found the deepest transformation in solitude, proved that presence begins when the noise ends. He learned that the most profound conversations happen in silence, and the richest connection we'll ever experience is the one we have with ourselves. These 6 stories, woven together by Stoic principles, reveal something universal, that in a world obsessed with noise, the most powerful people are the ones who cultivate stillness, that you can lead, create, rise, and heal not by being louder, but by being truer, by protecting your energy, by being deliberate with your words, by refusing to hand over your peace just to fit into a world that's forgotten how to be still. So what's the takeaway here? It's simple, but not easy. You do not have to prove your strength. You only have to live it. Life will always test you. You will be misunderstood, overlooked, pushed, tempted to respond, to react, to share, to shout. But you get to choose a different path, a Stoic path, one of inner leadership, of silent progress, of being so grounded that the world's chaos can't knock you off balance. Here's how you apply it right now when you're facing a challenge. Don't rush to post it. Sit with it. Write it down. Ask yourself what's within your control and act from there. When you feel the urge to pause. Ask, is this for connection or attention? When success arrives, celebrate it privately first. Let it deepen inside you before it's spoken into the world. When you're creating something important, protect it. Let it grow in silence, free from judgment or expectation. When gossip surrounds you, step out. Protect your mind like it's sacred. Ground because it is. And when you feel alone, remember, solitude isn't absence, it's your sanctuary. Lean into it. You don't need the world to witness your every step. You only need to take those steps with intention. Because those who move quietly often go further. They build slower, but stronger. They're not here to impress. They're here to endure, to create, to lead from the inside out. So now I turn it over to you. Which part of this journey spoke to you most deeply? Was it Maya's restraint, James's guarded honesty, Lena's humble fire, Theo's silent creation, Zoe's gossip cleanse, or Eli's sacred solitude? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's build a space where we can learn from each other's insights. Your voice might be the one that helps someone else take their first Stoic step. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you reflect, breathe deeper, or even shift something inside, please subscribe to the channel. It's your way of fueling the next piece of meaningful content, the next voice that needs to be heard. This isn't just philosophy. It's a way of life, a quieter, deeper, stronger one. Let's walk it together.